are on DAF Tesvav Amud Aleph, Tana Rabbanan. Remember, we're talking about the Arba'a Shenichnasu Lapardes, the four that have entered into the orchard of either mystical or deep philosophical speculation. All emerge in some way damaged, except for Rabbi Akiva. We learned a little bit about Ben Zoma yesterday, and we learned that Ben Zoma was damaged mentally. And then the Gemara discussed some statements of Ben Zoma, which we really didn't understand why. But of course, if you look deeper, you'll see that these are connected to Ben Zoma's damage because he took in too much of a gaze of Hashem. Tanu Rabbanan. Now let's take a look a little bit more about Ben Zoma. Maisa Berebi Yehoshua ben Chananya Shahaya Omer al Gav Maila Bahar Habayis. There was once a story about Rabbi Yehoshua is standing at a high place on the Temple Mount. V'ra'ohu Ben Zoma v'lo amad milukanav. Ben Zoma sees him at a distance, and Ben Zoma is looking out into space. And you know when you look at someone and they're staring right at you, and you can tell that they're not really seeing you, because he's so engrossed in some kind of really, really deep contemplation. So Amar Lo me'ayin ula'ayin Ben Zoma. So Rabbi Yeshua comes over to him and he says, from where and to where are you going? In other words, you've been traveling somewhere in the universe in your mind. What's going on? So Amar Lo, Tsofe ha'yisi bein mayim ha'elyonim l'mayim ha'tachtonim ve'ein bein zelo ze ela shalosh etzba'os bilvad. I was contemplating about the distance between the upper waters and the lower waters. We know that the Torah says at the second day of creation, Hashem separates between the higher waters and the lower waters with the rakia, with the firmament. And I was thinking about the distance between the two waters, and it's only 3 fingers' breadths. Now, we learned before that a rakia takes 500 years to traverse, so this is clearly something different, okay? So, but in any event, there's a lot of depth here. What?
Hashem's fingers, maybe he's talking about.
Okay, you could say that, but you'll see in just a second we're going to minimize that shear. Shenemar v'ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamayim kayona shemerachefes al baneha ve'ino nogaas. As it says that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, and he's interpreting that pasuk as being that Hashem represents the upper waters, hovering over like a dove over the lower waters, separated by 3 fingers' breadths, just like a dove hovering over its chicks. Merachefes, right? In Ha'azinu, okay, right. Amar lahen Rebbe Yehoshua l'talmid of Adayin ben Zoma mibachutz. Talked about this in a Pirkei Avos a while ago. So Rabbi Yehoshua says to his students, Ben Zoma is still on the outside. In other words, he still doesn't get it. He hasn't reached the innermost depths of understanding of Sisrei Torah, because Mechdi v'ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamayim eimas havi b'yom harishon and havdalah b'yom sheni hu dahavai. He says because he's using the wrong pasuk. It says the pasuk that he quoted to prove that it's 3 fingers' breadths is talking about God on the first day of creation, and where it says that the Spirit of God hovers over the face of the water. But the separation between the upper waters and the lower waters didn't take place until the second day of creation. That's when God gave the command to the waters should separate. Vikama, so taka, then what is the real answer? What is the real answer? Distance between the upper waters and the lower waters. Amar Ravacha bar Yaakov kimalonima, that it is a hair's breadth. The Rabbanan Amri ki guda de gamla. The Rabbanan say that it's like the distance between 2 planks on a bridge, which are very tightly compacted together. And Marzut Vitema Ravasi Amar kitre glimi deprisi ahadadi. And he says that it's like the distance between 2 cloaks that are folded up, stacked in a linen closet on top of each other, so that there's almost no distance. It's minuscule. The Amrila kitrekasi deschifi ahadadi, and some say that it is like 2 money bags that have been folded up and stacked on top of each other. If you can calculate the distance between those 2, that's the distance between the upper waters and the lower waters. And of course, what the Gemara is trying to convey, at least at the simplest level of mystical knowledge, is that there is really just a very, very sheer veil between the divine realm and the physical realm, and it is extremely, extremely minuscule. So let's go now on to Acher, because we talked about Ben Zoma. Interesting that the Gemara doesn't discuss Ben Azai here, but maybe we'll get to him later. But we're now up to Acher, Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya, whose name was changed to Acher. Kitzeitz ben Etios. We said about him that he chopped down the saplings. And Rashi explains over here that what that means is that he expounded destructively about God and came to incorrect conclusions that were very destructive, because he came to the conclusion that God was not a unitary essence, a unitary being, and perhaps he was far too removed from this world. And in any event, he came to some very unacceptable theological conclusions. So, Hakasav Omer al titen espicha lachtias b'sarecha. And about him, the pasuk says, "Do not allow your mouth to cause your flesh to sin." Maihi. So, what happened to him? What did he see? That chazam mitatron de isyahav ale reshusa lemesav ulemichtav zachavasa de Israel. So, the Gemara relates that there's an angel called Metatron. We won't get into who Metatron is. It's not one of the Transformers, but it's the angel of the world. It's the angel of the world, and the angel of the world is a very, very strong archangel that God creates as an intermediary between our world and the divine realm. And even though normally angels are not permitted to sit, they're always standing erect and serving Hashem, but nevertheless, one moment every day, Metatron is given permission to sit so that he can write down the merits of the Jewish people in the divine ledger. Okay, whatever that means. So Amar Gemira de Lamayla lo havi lo yeshiva v'lo tachus v'lo orf v'lo ifoy shemachas v'shalom beis reshuyo saying. So Acher is witness to this, and he says, wait a minute, I have a tradition that the angels are not allowed to, they don't sit, there is no strife among them. They don't even have the back of a neck, meaning their head is 360 degrees around, is always face. And velo ifoy, and there's no weariness among the angels. They're constant in their strength and in their performance. So the fact that Metatron is sitting down maybe implies that he's a god instead of being just an angel, and maybe there's more than one god. So afku ala Metatron umachyuhu shisim pulse denura. So they grabbed the rest of the heavenly entourage grabs Metatron, and they start whipping him or whacking him with sticks of fire to punish him. Why is he being punished? So Amar Luhu my taima, because ki chazise lo kamta mikamei. So why are you hitting me? They said, because when you saw a mortal gazing at you seated, you should have immediately arisen so that you would be able to dispel his misunderstanding. So isyahiva le reshusa mimchak zachavasa da'acher. So, but at that moment, because Metatron had to suffer as a result of Acher's misunderstanding, permission was given to him to erase all of the merits that he had previously inscribed into that book, into God's ledger, about Acher's Zechus, and he said, okay, I'm erasing it now. If I'm going to get whipped because of Acher, I'm going to erase his Zechuyos.
He was the one who was Lifnei Iver.
What?
He was the one who was Lifnei Iver.
Yes. So even though, yes, it was Lifnei Iver. In other words, in a sense, it was Lifnei Iver, although he was, can you really blame Metatron? He's just doing his job, right?
He says Acher's allowed to go to that.
And and Acher was exactly, and Acher intruded, So on the one hand, there's a certain fault that Metatron has to assume, but also Acher has to take the blame also, and this is the blame he takes. So Yatzasa Baskol ve'amra.
Which connection between Pulsa Dinora in Lachaledi?
I'm not sure, but you'll have to work on that. So Yatzasa Baskol ve'amra shuvu vanim shovavim chutz me'acher. So a heavenly voice comes out and says, return, O wayward children. Everyone except for Acher has the opportunity to return. So this is what the heavenly voice says. And Omar Hol ve'itrid hahu gavra mihahu alma leifok lisani behai alma. So when Acher realizes this, he says, listen, I've lost the next world. Let me at least enjoy this world. So nafak Acher letarbus ra'a. So he goes, therefore, and there are people like this who basically say, listen, I've done so much bad in my life, there's no hope for me, there's no rehabilitation, so let me just do whatever I can, let me go to hit rock bottom. So therefore he goes out and he goes off the derech, as they say. Nafak ashkach zoyna tava. So he finds a prostitute and he asks for her services. Amrlei v'lav Elisha ben Abuya at. So she said, 1 second, you're the famous Elisha ben Abuya, what are you doing with Zaina? So akar pugla mimeshra b'Shabbos v'yohavla amar acheru. So he then goes over, it's on Shabbos, and he pulls out a radish that's growing from the ground, from a row of vegetables, and he shows her that, look, I'm a Machalel Shabbos now, I'm not the same guy. So she says, oh, you're an Acher, you're a totally different man. So therefore, okay, and the name stuck. That's how he got the name Acher. So Shoal Acher is Reb Meir Lacher Sheyosel Tarbus Ra. So Acher once asked Reb Meir, who stuck with him, as we'll see. Reb Meir stuck with Acher even after he left Yiddishkeit, and he asked Reb Meir the following question: Amar le Mai Dichsiv Gamazeh Umazeh Asaha Elokim. What does the pasuk mean in Koheles when it says that God creates equilibrium and balance in the world? For every yin, He creates a yang. For every up, He creates a down, etc. So Amar Lo Kol Masha Hakadosh Baruch Hu Bara Ba'olamo Kenegdo Bara. That everything that God creates, He has something opposite or contrasting it in the world, so that there's perfect balance. Bara Harim Bara Gvos. For every mountain, there's a valley. And Bara Yamim Bara Naharos. God creates oceans, but He also creates rivers that can drain the ocean and cause a flow from the ocean into another source. So Armalo Rabbi Akiva Rabchalo Amarkach. So Acher criticizes Reb Meir's interpretation. He says that's not the way your Rabbi Akiva, my chaver, that's not the way that he learned the pasuk. And he said, Ela bara tzadikim bara rishayim bara ganeden bara gehenim. But rather the equilibrium is God creates the righteous and the wicked. He creates Gan Eden and He creates Gehenna. And what he's really alluding to is the fact that, look, if we got great tzaddikim, we also need the Darth Vaders of the world, and so that's my job, right? In other words, he's reflecting upon the fact that this is I'm fulfilling part of the task of equilibrium in the world. Kol echad ve'echad yesh lo beis chalakim, echad began Eden ve'echad begehenim. Zachat tzadik natal chelko v'chelek chavero began Eden, is chayiv rasha natal chelko v'chelek chavero begehenim. And therefore, every tzaddik has two portions in Gan Eden. Every person has two portions. One portion in Gan Eden and one portion in Gehenna. If a person lives his life as a tzaddik, so then he gets two portions in Gan Eden, his own portion and his friend's portion. And if he lives as a rasha, he gets two portions in Gehenna, his own portion and his friend's portion. Now, why is that fair? Well, the answer that some of the Meforshim speak out is that if a tzaddik and a rasha live next to each other, the rasha is doubly punished, not only for his own behavior, but for not having learned from the tzaddik. And why does the tzaddik get the double portion? Not only for his own mitzvahs, but for the fact that he didn't learn from the rasha. So that's why he gets the double portion.
Acher was not an atheist.
Well, we don't know what he is at this point. He's definitely a sectarian. He's definitely a heretic. He has strange conceptions about God. Whether he can't not believe in God. He's been up into the divine realm, but he's got a confused understanding of God.
He also caused a lot of problems for clients. So.
Yes, he did. And the Gemara is actually not going to talk about that. That's in the Yerushalmi. It's more from the Yerushalmi than it is from the Bavli. So the Bavli sort of glosses over that, but that's a good point. Amar of Mesharshia Maikra, where do you see the psukim that indicate that tzaddikim and rishayim get double portions? Because Gabi tzaddikim ksiv lachein be'artza mishna yirshu. It says in their land they shall inherit a double. And Gabi rishayim ksiv u'mishna shivron shivram. And it says by rishayim that there's a double breakage in their breaking. So therefore you see that both tzaddikim and rishayim have a double. So Shaul Acher Reb Meir Lacher Sheyasel Tarbus Ra. Again, Acher asks Reb Meir after he went astray, Mai Dirsiv Lo Ya'archena Zahav U'Zechuchis U'Smurasa Klipaz. This is a pasuk in Eov, and it says there is no value to the great preciousness of gold and glass, and in its exchange fine gold utensils. So what does this pasuk refer to? So Amar Lo Elu Divrei Torah Shekoshen Liknosim Kechlei Zavu Chlei Paz V'Nochen La'abdam Kechlei Zechuchis. He says this pasuk refers to Torah because Torah is very difficult to acquire. It's like acquiring; you have to invest so much. It's like spending a lot of money on gold and fine gold utensils. But it's also very fragile and very easy to lose, just like a glass utensil, which can be broken very easily. So, and he's trying to allude to Acher that I know you've invested a lot, but you've also broken it because it was fragile. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva Rabcha lo Amar Kach. So Acher shakes his head and he says, no, that's not the way your Rabbi Akiva learned it. Elamakli zahavu chlei zechuchis afal pisha nishbru yesh lem takana af talmidei chachamim afal pisha sarach yesh lo takana. But rather what it means, and again reflecting upon himself, even though gold and glass can be broken but can be melted down and repaired, so too a Talmud Chacham, even though he's he's gone astray, can always be repaired. There's always a hope for rehabilitation. So Amrlo, Afatach Hazorbach. So Meir says, well, if that's the case, then why don't you do tshuva? So Amrlo, Kvar Shamati Me'achori Apargo Tshuva Vanim Shovivim Chutz Me'acher. He says, it's too late for me. I've already heard the decree from behind the divine curtain that everyone has the opportunity for tshuva except for me. Tanu Rabbanan. And by the way, many people feel that way. In other words, many people emotionally have that sense that I'm beyond redemption. But the truth is, even Acher, as the Sfarim speak out, was not beyond redemption. Tana Rabbanan Maisa ba'acher shahirochev alasus b'Shabbos v'yirmeir mahalech acher of lil motorah mipiv. There's a story now the Brisa gives. Again, you see, Reb Meir was constantly running after Acher, trying to learn from him on the one hand, and trying to rehabilitate him on the other hand. And he's running after him at Shabbos. You got this image of Acher riding on a horse, so he's Machalel Shabbos. Reb Meir's running after him to be able to speak with him and learning. And then Amar lo Meir chazor la'acharecha shekvar shi'arti b'kvi asus ad kan tchum Shabbos. Acher says to him, listen, Reb Meir, you can't travel any further. We're about to go outside the tchum of Shabbos. So Amar le afatach hazor bach. So he says, well, Rebbe, then you should stop also. Come back to the town with me. Amar le v'lo kvar amarti lach kvar shamarti me'achori apar goshuv vanim shovavim chutz me'acher. I already told you it's too late for me. I've already heard from behind the curtain that I don't have the opportunity for tshuva. But takfei ayla lebei medrash. But nonetheless, Reb Meir sort of pressured him and schleps him into the base medrash. So Amar leili yinuka psok li psukechas. He goes over to the first child he can find. He says, "Tell me a pasuk that you learned recently." So Amar lo. So the child tells him. And this is a very funny pasuk for a child to learn. In Yeshaya, he says, "Ein shalom amar Hashem lo rishoyim," that there is no peace for the wicked, says God. So again, the child is like a mini nevuah. The child is telling him. So Ayle lebe kinishta achariti brings him to another shul. Amar lo liyanuka psok li psukecha. Tell me what pasuk you learned. So Amar lo ki im techabsi baneser v'sarbi lach boris nichtam avonech lefanai num Hashem Elokim. Pasuk from Yirmiyah that Hashem says no matter how much you try to cleanse yourself with detergents and soaps, the stain of your sin will always be before me. Not a very encouraging pasuk. So Ayle lebe kinishta acharisi. Then he brings him to another shul. Amar le liyanuka psok li psukecha. The same thing. Tell me a pasuk. Amar le. So the child tells to him, "Ve'at shadud mata asi kisil b'shishani kisadi adi zahav kisikri bapuch einayich lashav tisyapi masubach onavim nafshech yivakeshu." So, or is it ogevim? Ogevim, right? So basically, Hashem says, no matter how much you try to beautify yourself, no matter how much you try to make yourself look nice, nothing's nishtvar helfen. It's not going to work. They're still going to despise you. That he took him to 13 different shuls, and in every one he finds a child and they tell him all the same thing. Labasra, at the last shul, Amar le psok li psukecha, he tells the kid, tell me what pasuk you learned. I can imagine Acher's probably just weary at this point. Amar le v'larasha Amar Elokim malach lisaper chuki v'goymer. That God says to the wicked man, why are you even trying to relate my law? Give it up already. So hahu yenuka have a megam game belishne, but that child, not only did he quote that pasuk, but he had a speech impediment. So therefore, when he said "Ishtama kamad Amar le v'le Elisha Amar Elokim," but the way the words came out of his mouth, it sounded like instead of saying "V'la Rasha Amar," he said "V'le Elisha Amar." That God speaks to Elisha directly and says, "Give up already." So Ika da Amri Sakina Haba Bahadei V'Kari V'Shadri L'Tleiser Be'Kinishta. Some say that Acher had a sword, and he chopped up the kid into 13 pieces and dismembered him and sent a piece to each one of those shuls where the children spoke ill of him. V'ika da Amri Amrar ihavoy bi'adi sakina have a karanale. And others say that no, he just said, if I had a sword in my hands, I would cut you up into little pieces and ship you off to the different shuls. I like that version better. Anyway,
the 13 must be the Rachamim.
Yeah, presumably so. There's so much imagery here. We could spend weeks just on these few lines. Kinach nafshe da'acher amri lo meidan lidaine velo la'alma da'asi lesi. So when Acher passed away, or as he was passing away, the heavenly courts said, we have a dilemma. We cannot judge him for Gehenna, but we cannot send him to the next world either. He's going to have to stay in limbo. Lo meidan lidaini mishum da'asak be'oraisa v'lo la'alma da'asi leisi mishum dechata. We can't bring him to judgment because, after all, he was a Torah scholar. We can't send him to the next world, to his final resting place, because he was so sinful. So Amar Reb Meir mutav de lidaini v'leisi la'alma da'asi. So Reb Meir says, better that I can convince the heavenly court to bring Acher to judgment, send him to Gehenna, so that eventually he'll be purged. He'll go through that purgatory process, and he'll eventually get to his final resting spot. So therefore, Masai Omos Viale Oshun Mikivro. Therefore, my goal is that when I die, I'm looking forward to the day I die, so that I can go, as my Neshama, I can go to the heavenly court, and I will convince them to send my Rebbe into Gehenna. And therefore, I'll bring smoke as the sign that I was successful. I'll cause the smoke of Gehenna to rise from his grave. And that's exactly what happened. When Reb Meir passed away, that very day, smoke began to ascend from his grave, from Acher's grave. Amar Reb Yochanan gevurte lemikla Rabbi. So Rabbi Yochanan says, as he sees the smoke in the next generation coming up from Acher's grave, he says, is it such a great thing that the student has succeeded in getting his Rebbe to burn in Gehenna? So Chad Hava Beinana Velomatzina La'atzulei, he says, there's a great man that was among us. Isn't there a way that we can at least save him? Let's get him out of Gehenna now. So Inakte Biyad Man Mirmile, that if I grab him by the hand, who's going to try and stop me? In other words, my goal is that when I die, I'm going to go down to Gehenna, and I'm going to schlep Acher out of Gehenna and bring him back up to his final resting spot. So man, who's going to stop me? So Amar Masai Amos Va'achabe Ashon Mikivro, and the sign will be that when I die, my goal is to make sure that there's no more smoke that comes up from his grave. That'll be a sign that he's gone to Gan Eden. So, and that's exactly what happened. So, Pasach Alei Ha'us Abdana, and when they eulogized Rabbi Yochanan at his Levaya, he said, Afilu Shomer HaPesach Lo Amad Lefanecha Rabbeinu. That, oh, our master, even the guard at the entrance of Gehenna could not stop you, could not stand in your way. That shows this greatness of Rabbi Yochanan. But it also shows that even a man like Acher finally found respite and was finally atoned by going through Gehenna. Now this was a generation or two generations after Acher. So you see, but sometimes it takes a long time, but eventually a person can be atoned. Bito shel Acher asya lekami de Rebbe. The daughter of Acher comes before Rebbe. Amrle Rebbe Parnasena. This is after Acher has died. She's left destitute. She says, Rebbe, please sustain me. Amrla Bas Mi'at. By the way, if you ever want to read a beautiful, it'll bring tears to your eyes, Milton Steinberg, As a Driven Leaf. It's a novelized version of the whole story of Acher. And I remember reading it so vividly just several years ago, and it's so poignantly written. It was written many years ago by a rabbi, and he just had a beautiful style about him. But it's a very novelized version of this whole story. So Amar la Bas Mi'at. So he said to her, Rebbe says to her, whose daughter are you? So Amar lo Bito Shel Acher Ani, I'm Acher's daughter. Amar lo Adayin Yesh Mizaro Ba'olam, how can it be that he still has a remnant in this world? V'haksiv lo nin lo v'lo neched ba'amo ve'in sarid b'megurav, that for those who provoke God, there will be no remnant, no descendant that will come from them. So Amar lo Zechor leTorasav al Tiskor Masav. She said, Rebbe, just remember his Torah. Don't remember his bad deeds. Please have Rachmanas on me. Miyad yarda eish v'sichsechas afsolo shel Rebbe. And then immediately, because Rebbe had said something untoward about Acher, a fire came down from heaven and began to singe the bench on which Rebbe was sitting on. So Bacha va'amar Rebbe cried in witnessing this miracle. He said, if this is how God defends the honor of those who rebelled against him, then surely those who took praise in Hashem and were able to act honorably in their lives, how much more so? So let's go back to the story about Reb Meir running after Acher, learning Torah from him. How could he do such a thing? It's one of the Haftorahs that we read. It says that from the mouth of a Kohen they shall preserve knowledge, and they shall seek Torah from his mouth, because he is an angel of God. And that teaches us that if the teacher if the Kohen that you're going to seek Torah from, in his personal behavior is like a malach, then it's appropriate to learn from him. But if he's not, then you should not learn Torah from him. So Amar Reish Lakish, Reb Meir kra ashkach v'darach. So the v'darash. So Reish Lakish says yes, but Reb Meir found another pasuk. The pasuk says, Hat oznecha ushma divrei chachamim v'libcha tashis ledati. The pasuk in Mishlei says, incline your ear, listen to the words of the sages, and let your heart pay attention to my thoughts. So what is Hashem saying? L'daitim lo nemar ela l'dati. In other words, you have a right to distill what the Chacham is saying and only extract that which is my thought, says Hashem. So therefore, even if the Talmud Chacham is not a good person in his personal behavior, this pasuk implies that as long as you just extract divine knowledge and leave over the rest, then that's okay. So Rav Chanina Amar Mehacha. Rav Chanina says, there's another pasuk in Tehillim. It says, Shimi basuri'i v'hati ozneich v'shichichi amechu be'savich begomer. It says, listen, my daughter, incline your ear, and forget about your nation and about the house of your father. In other words, forget about how people are behaving and just listen to the words of Hashem. So that's also. So the Gemara says, so you see, you can distill and extract. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute, so kashu kroya hadadi. So how do you reconcile it? One pasuk says the Rebbe's got to be like a malach in order to learn Torah from him. And these psukim imply that he doesn't. You can distill. So the Gemara says, lo kasha habegadol habekat. And the answer is a very important answer. And it says it depends on the maturity of the student. That if the student is young and very impressionable, then the Rebbe has to be pristine in their personal behavior. But if the student is an adult and mature and has the ability to discern and distill and extract and discard the rest, so then you can learn even from a person who's not exemplary in their personal behavior. It's a tremendous achrayus on a malamed tinokos, on a person who teaches children, that the responsibility on a teacher of children is far greater than just on a guy like me who's teaching adults. Right? That's why I didn't go into day school education. It's too risky. Ki asa ravdimi Amar Amri b'ma'arava Rabbi Meir achal tichla v'shada shichla lebra. So the analogy they give about Reb Meir is that he ate the external fruit and threw away the pit. In other words, this was his way of distilling information from Acher. Darash Rava Maidich Sev Al Ginas Egos Yaradati Liros Be'ibei Hanochal. In a similar vein, it says in Shir Hashirim that I've gone down to the nut orchard to be able to see what's going on. So Lama Nimshlu Tamidei Chachamim Le'egos. Why are Tamidei Chachamim in this pasuk compared to a nut tree? Lomar lecha ma ego ze'afal pisha meluchlach batitu b'tzoa ein masha b'socha nimas af tamidei chachamim afal pisha sarach ein toraso nim eses. It's to tell you that just like Acher, he dirtied himself externally through his personal behavior, but yet his Torah knowledge remained intact. Just like a nut, which is covered by a shell, it can roll in the mud and still the nut remains clean and intact. And therefore Reb Meir was justified in learning Torah from him because his Torah knowledge remained intact. So the Gemara tells us a story about Rabbi, who once is conversing with Eliyahu Hanavi, and he says, what is God doing at this moment? God is quoting from all of the different Torah, from all the different sages, except for Reb Meir. So he said, why? Why is Reb Meir being excluded? Because Reb Meir learned Torah from Acher, and therefore he's tainted. So Reb Meir rimon masa tocho achal klipaso zorak. But that's not fair. Reb Meir was doing this. He found a beautiful pomegranate, and he threw away the peel. He discarded the peel, and he ate the fruit inside. He ate the seeds. So therefore, what Reb Meir did was quite appropriate. So Amarlei Hashta Kamer Meir B'ni Oimer. So then Eliyahu said to him, because of your great defense of Reb Meir, now Hashem is citing Meir, my son, and he's now quoting Torah from Rabbi Meir. Ironic, isn't it? How Stam Mishnah Reb Meir, like we just learned about this past Shabbos, that all of the Mishnayos that Rebbe Yehuda Hanassi writes, when there's no attribution, they're the language of Reb Meir. So even though Reb Meir is the one who has this questionable methodology of studying from a heretic, but yet his knowledge is the things that are the words that get passed down in our Mishnayos. Okay. Bisman sha'adam mitzdayer shechina malashon omeres kalani meiroshi kalani mizroi. So again, this is Eliyahu giving over information to Rabbi, and he says to him that when God is upset and God has pain over the deaths of or the suffering of people in this world, the Shechina says Kalani Meroshi Kalani Mizrah. Rashi says this is a lashon sagi nohor, that it means I am too heavy for my head, I'm too heavy for my arms, which means that the weight of the sadness of the world is weighing very heavily on me. Even though the word kalani means I'm lighter, it's a euphemism for saying I'm so heavy. And if this is the way God feels, even when bad people die, then surely when righteous people die, it surely is painful for the Ribbono Shel Olam. Once Shmuel finds Rav Yehuda leaning on the doorway of the Beis Medrash, very despondent, very upset, crying. Amar le Shinan, amai kabachis. So he said to him, "O sharp one, why are you crying?" So Amar le mi zutra mai dichsiv behu rabbanan. Is it's so insignificant what it is said in the pasuk about the rabbis? Aryai sofer, Aryai shokel, Aryai sofer es amigdalim. So where is the sofer? Where is the scribe? Where is the weigher? Where is he who counts the towers? Now, what does this pasuk mean? Aryai sofer shahu sofrim kolosio shebetorah. Where is the scribe? Why is the scribe called a sofer? Because literally he counts the letters of the Torah. That's what the word sofer is, a counter. Aryai shokel, who is the weigher? Shahu shoklim kalim v'chamurim shebetorah, that they are able to extract kal v'chomer laws from the Torah. That's the person who weighs the light and the heavy. Aryai soferes hamigdalim shayushanim gimel meyos halachos b'migdal hapareach ba'avir. Where are the weighers of the towers? Now, this means that there were certain rabbis who had such depth of knowledge of Torah Sheba'al Peh that they could derive 300 laws just having to do with some arcane law. Rashi explains what this means is about the laws of a suspended tower that is acting as an overhang for an ohel, such that it transmits tumah. That's what this suspended tower is supposed to represent. A very sophisticated area of halacha. And Rabbi Ami had taught that there were 300 questions that these two biblical characters, Doeg and Achitophel, who lived in the times of David, that they were able to expound upon regarding these laws of Tumas Ohel, having to do with the suspended tower. And yet we know that Doeg and Achitophel lost their portion in the world to come, as recorded in the Mishnah and Sanhedrin. So therefore, when we say, where are these people? Meaning that they've been lost from the world to come, and yet they were such great scholars. So Anan Mati Havi Alon. We, who are lesser scholars than them, what shall become of us? How do we know that we're going to be Zoicha to Olam Haba? And that's what Rav Yehuda was crying about. You would think that the Torah knowledge should protect you and make you a great tzaddik. But it doesn't always work that way. And Rabbi Yehuda was therefore very despondent about the uncertainty of his own future. Perhaps he felt that there was a Yetzer Hara welling up within him, and he wasn't sure of his future. So Amar Le Shinana, Tina Haisa Belibam. So Shmuel reassures him, and he says, "Sharp one, don't be concerned. All of those other people who were great scholars and yet fell from grace, they had displayed symptoms already in their youth that there was something wrong." And what does this mean? So Acher Mai, Zemer Yavani Lo Pasak Mipume. With Acher, what was it? That as a young man, he always was singing Greek songs. So we're in trouble. But he didn't say Beatles songs. He said Greek songs. Now what's wrong? So Rashi simply tells us that it had to do with the fact that it was after the Churban, and you're not supposed to be singing songs after the Churban. That's the problem. So it could be MBD songs also. It's Lav Dafka Greek. But there could be other interpretations as well. I'm not discounting those. I'm just letting you know. This was the problem with Acher, is that he didn't have that sense of sobriety and solemnity that a Talmud Chacham is supposed to have. Amru alav al Acher b'shasha hi'omid mibeis hamedrash harbe sifrei minim noshim mecheko. And another thing they said about Acher, that when he would get up from the Beis Medrash, there were many heretical books that would fall from his bosom. In other words, he was hiding books in his lapel about Aristotle and Plato while he was still sitting in the base medrash. And Shaul Nemos Hagardius Reb Meir, once Nemos, the weaver, asked Reb Meir, now who this person was is a whole study on its own, we won't go into that, but he asked Reb Meir the following question. Kol Amar Denachis Liora Salik, he says, when you take fresh wool and you want to dye it, so you put it in the dyer's vat, when you pull it out, will it come out fully dyed? What he was asking him was that when a Talmid Chacham, or a student, immerses himself into the Torah of the Beis Medrash and learns from his Rebbeim, and then he leaves the Beis Medrash, can you rest assured that he will be properly colored with Torah for the rest of his life? So Amarle kol man havanaki agav ime solik, kol delo havanaki agav ime lo solik. And his answer to him was, it depends, not necessarily. If a person was clean from his mother, meaning that if the fleece was pure and not dirty when it was placed in the vat, then you can be rest assured that it will come out fully dyed. But if there were stains and dirt and debris on the wool when it went in, so then when you pull it out, it won't be evenly dyed because of the stains that were on it when it first went in. Now, what does this mean? So Rashi has a couple of interpretations, but essentially it means that if a person had Yira Shamayim when he went into the Beis Medrash, he'll come out as a great Torah scholar. The Torah will remain with him for the rest of his life. But if he went in without that sobriety and without that solemnity and the desire to learn, and he didn't come into the Beis Medrash with the proper attitude, then there's no guarantee that when he leaves the Beis Medrash, he's going to come out with being a permanent Torah scholar and a Yirei Shamayim. There are no guarantees, and we all know that. We all know from personal experience, guys who spend years in the Beis Medrash, unfortunately things happen, right? But the hope is that when you put him in the dyer's vat, he'll come out whole, and that usually is the case. Have a wonderful day, everyone.